Hey everyone, this is Sony Artisan and Singh-Ray Ambassador Don Smith, and I'm here with your June tip of the month. And if you've been following along, you know every month I like to give you guys some processing tips directed primarily to landscape because that's what I do and do for a living. And speaking of that, before we get started today, I am doing a brand new workshop out in Madeline Island, Wisconsin, this August 2nd through 6th that I'm really excited about. Love to have you guys come out and join us. I think we still have a few spots open. This isn't one of my workshops where I control it 100%. Rather, I am teaching for the Madeline Island School of the Arts. They're a great group of people and they put on a lot of different programs. Check them out. You can get more information on this workshop if you just go to my website, www.donsmithphotography.com/workshops, and just click on the Madeline Island workshop icon. It'll follow the links and it'll give you the description of what we're doing. It's going to be 3 full days and 2 part-time days, 2 half days I call them. But it's actually a really beautiful area. Barry and I went out a couple of weeks ago. We scouted out our locations, and it's an island that's one of 22 islands in a chain called the Apostle Islands, for those of you familiar with the area. And we're even going to do a sunset tour on a boat where we're going to go out and go up along a cool island called, way up on the north end, called Devil's Island at sunset. And they got a lot of really cool little sea caves and stuff. We're going to get up close and personal to those. I also have access to canoes and kayaks. We can go out on Big Lagoon, which is very close to the school. It's only a couple miles away. And we're going to try to do at least 1, maybe 2 sunrises there, and also maybe try to do a sunset there where we can get you out. We experienced a lot of beautiful light and different effects. Like we went out one evening, we had mist rising off the lake. Really cool. So we'd love to have you join us August 2nd through 6th. Get in touch with Madeline Island School of the Arts, and we'll see you there in Wisconsin. So let's start out. I want to give you 5 tips that can help you improve your landscape photography. Things maybe you haven't thought of. I keep trying to dig around, find some new things for you guys, and feel free to always send me an email, don@donsmithphotography.com, and give me some topics. So let's get started with this one. This is a picture I shot, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Maybe more than that because I was using Canon gear back then. This is of some petroglyphs out near Bishop, California, which is on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Really cool. It wasn't the best light to shoot under, but I was having a great time driving around these dirt roads in the loop, and I got a map from the visitor center and they showed me where to go. So if you followed along, you know I always like to come into my develop module, look at my whites and my blacks, and I'm holding the Alter Option key depending if you're on a Mac or a PC. And you can see we're a little hot on the whites, so I'm going to dial those back. And the blacks, I just want to introduce some blacks into the image. We've talked about this numerous times. It has to do with density maximum when you go out to print. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot that needs to be modified in this image. But I want to show you how to get a little boost out of your color. And you're going to do it on a pixel level, which is kind of cool. So if you come down here under the calibration tab, which is way down on the bottom, you can see that you have your 3 primary colors, red, green, and blue. Let's say I want to give a little bit of a boost to that blue sky up there. I would simply come down to the hue and I would pull over to the right. And you can go really crazy if you want, but a lot of these moves I find are just very subtle. You can also come up in here and change the hue if you wanted to. Maybe I back that off a little bit. And then there's a lot of red and yellows, warm colors in these rocks. So let's come up and see if we tug on the saturation of that. And you can see that I can really bring that out, but I don't want to go overboard. All of this kind of is just, to taste. So pretty cool. That just shows you before and then just 2 tugs on some of the primary saturation sliders and a little reduction, excuse me, in the blue hue here. And we've brought out those colors a little bit more. Now, that's tip number 1. So while this is opening up into Photoshop, I want to go about teaching you tip number 2. I would love to just sharpen this image with just the rocks. I don't want to be sharpening or adding any type of sharpening effects up in the sky or the clouds. And I've actually talked to the engineers. I love Topaz, their new sharpener AI and their denoise AI. I just don't know if there's anything else out on the market. There is DxO Optics, and they have their prime noise reduction in PhotoLab 4, which is also outstanding. So you guys got a lot of options, but here I want to teach you how to go about sharpening just these rocks and not the sky. Now, the first thing you could do is just fully trust that the software algorithm would know not to mess with the sky. But that's through my tests, I don't find that's always the case. So I want to go in and I want to isolate these rocks. And the way we do it is we come up here to select in Photoshop, and it would seem natural if I clicked on subjects that it would pick up the rocks, right? Well, you can see that it doesn't. I don't know why. That seems real obvious to me, why this line would run across there. Come on, Adobe, you guys are better than this. So I would then have to go into my magic wand or selection tool, excuse me, and start trying to make this all match up. And I'm going to show you an easier way. I don't know why object recognition is so hard in Photoshop, but 99% of the time when I want to select the sky, bang, it just nails it for me. So I'm not sure why that is. So my next move would be to go ahead and invert this selection. And the way we do this is just hold down Shift, Command, and I. And now you can see that the selection has been made to just the rock. So now that we have just the rock selected, we're going to hold down Command J. I'm on a Mac, and you're going to see that now it has just selected the rocks. So I'm going to turn my background back on, but I want to make sure that this layer is selected light gray, and then I'm going to come up under filters and I'm going to go down to Topaz Sharpen AI, and now when the software opens up, it's going to leave the sky alone because it's not selected. So we don't have to worry about whether the algorithm is going to figure out that's a sky or not. And I want to point out up here, I always just go into the auto mode. I'm finding for the bulk of my work, that's fine. If you're finding something you're really struggling with that needs a lot of sharpening, then you can get into doing the manual controls. But for the majority of the work, I think if you just stay in auto, you're fine. Let's blow this up and get over here. Whoopsie. We don't want to come down that small, do we? So let's blow this up. And we're just going to come down here on an edge, and I'm going to turn this off and turn it on. You see it does a pretty good job. Okay, and that's the way I go in now, and I just select just the portion. I leave the sky out. I don't want that sharpened or anything soft like water or things like that, streams, creeks. And that way we are just sharpening the object itself. So that's tip number 2. Okay, tip number 3. This is a question I get asked a lot at workshops. Don, I'm in a high contrast area. You'll find this especially in the mountains at elevation, and especially at sunset, sunrise, when such as this scene here, and this is actually captured in Zion National Park behind the Zion Museum. This is the famous Tower of the Virgins, and it's a great sunrise location. It's one of the few I've actually found in the park that makes for a cool shot. And I used to run a fall workshop combined with Bryce Canyon, and then we'd come down to Zion and we try to time it for the fall colors. So you can see back up in here, I've got my cottonwoods and then I got my rabbit brush. But if I expose for the foreground, my highlights get washed. And conversely, if I expose for the highlights, my shadows go too dark. And if I try to open this up too much, let's say we come here and we ramp our shadows up and we bring them up even more, then we're going to get the dreaded noise. Okay, you guys are all familiar with that. So what's the best way to deal with this? Well, I'm going to reset that. Let me come back to basic and reset that. I'm not going to do any fiddling in the basic module. I'm just going to select both of these and I'm going to right click and I'm going to edit, but I want to come all the way to the bottom and I want to open these as layers in Photoshop. And I'm going to show you the reason why. We'll let these load up. There we go. And you can see that the dark or the highlight exposure, as I'll call it, is on the bottom and the shadow exposure is on top. Now, there's no rule that says it has to be one way or the other. I just like always having my darks up on top and my lights down on the bottom. Okay, so that's step one. Now, with the darks map or the darks exposure selected, I want to come down here to the bottom of the layer palette and I want to add a white mask. And now we're going to paint through that white mask with black to reveal what is underneath. And if this happens to be flipped, you can just click on that little arrow. If it happens to be another color, you can just click this icon right here and then flip it over. So I want to be the opposite of white, which is black. And then I simply want to tap the B key for brush. And for this demonstration, I'm going to use an opacity of 100% and a flow of 14 and just sort of paint it in incrementally. And what I'm going to do is just come down, stay away from those transitions as much as you can. And then I'm going to release and I'm going to just brighten up this interior. I want to suck the eye right through the middle here to pull the viewer in and kind of leave these edges a little bit dark. And this is going to be to taste to each and every one of you how much you want to leave these edges dark. I might actually lighten up that a little bit more and come up in through here and lighten that up. But I don't want to draw attention over here too much to the side of my image. There's not a lot really that's worth looking at down in here. So remember, darks will always work your eyes away from the scene, but here I want to bring that up and bring up all that fall color. So let's take a look at the mask, and it's really kind of intricate. You can see where it's full black. I got 100% out of the image below, and then the rest are kind of different shades of gray where I'm getting percentages of what's I want to reveal underneath. And I can just paint in and out. And if I find I paint too much, you know, I can bring the flow up. Let's just use this for an example. Say I kind of get way over in here and I go, nah, that's too much. Now all I have to do is flip the mask over and paint it back in, and I can always change my flow down to only change a portion of that. So you've got a lot of flexibility here in painting in and out. And that's what I call a freehand painted mask. You can get into much more detail, which is going to go beyond the scope of this video, by utilizing luminosity masks, which I'm going to talk about next, and smart objects. And that's something I might teach you in another video. But anyway, that's step number 3, and that's how we do a freehand mask. All right, let's move on to tip number 4. And this is going to be dealing with utilizing a graduated filter and a brush in Lightroom. And you can do, by the way, if you're working in Photoshop and you don't have Lightroom, you can do this in Adobe Camera Raw, same thing. This is a raw capture that I shot in a workshop I was co-teaching with Gary Hart in Yosemite. We're at a place called Camp 6, where the Merced River kind of bends around, and it's very calm in this area. And Gary had plotted out that the moon was going to be rising above Half Dome on this particular evening, and it was during the fall. And the key was to kind of get the moon coming up and reflecting down here, and Half Dome reflecting and revealing all this beautiful fall color. I'm going to show you a scene that's kind of the finished off version, but I'm going to show you how I got from here to there and in Lightroom. And then I'm going to show you how I got from here to there utilizing some luminosity masks in Photoshop. Okay, so first thing here, same thing. I want to do what I always do. I come into my basic develop module, and now I've got a moon up here that I don't want to lose detail in. So if I was to start cranking this all the way over to the right, you can see there I'm blowing the moon. So I'm going to back it off till that moon goes black. And then I'm going to come down to my blacks, and I'm going to open up those a little. I do want to have some blacks, and if you follow along with me through all these tutorials, you know that has to do with printing, density maximum. We do need absolute blacks in our print to make the contrast look correct. Okay, now we got to come up here and we got to ramp those shadows up, but oh boy, it's not really bringing them out the way I want to. So I got another option. I'm going to come down here to the tone curve, and I can be in either a regular curve. If you're a curves aficionado and you understand it, that's where I would recommend. But for the newbies, just come into this parametric curve, which is just a little wavy line right here, and you're going to get these 4 different areas of the curve that you can affect: highlights, lights, darks, and shadows. And I think for this one, I don't want to just go into shadows because that's very restrictive. You can see it kind of flattens the image out if I pull up on that. So I'm going to come into darks, which is a little bit more. When I hover over this, notice the gray area behind the curve. It shows you that it's affecting there about 3/4 of the curve. So I'm going to come up and pull that up and really start to bring out those trees. And that's starting to look really good. And you can see it's held my darks and it's held my brights, but it's bent that curve line up. Anything we open on a curve line off the diagonal is going to brighten. Anything we pull down is going to darken. But now it's made my sky a little too dark. I think everything from the trees down look really good and the reflection looks really good. So let's come back over here and let's add a graduated neutral density filter. And I'm going to make sure all of this is reset. And you can see I have sky that comes all the way down here. So that in the field, if I was to hold a graduated neutral density filter, it would record all of this as, you know, whatever darkness, 1, 2, 3, 4 stops, whatever I was holding in the grad. So I'm going to come about right here, and I'm going to just pull down to start with, and I'm going to back the exposure off. And what I'm watching for, you guys, in nature, typically reflections to my eye, at least, and you can run your own test, look about a stop darker than what it is being reflected. So in this case, the sky and the moon, I want it to look about a stop darker down here. And I want to bring this down a little and then bring it up off the trees. This is your feathering. How much are you going to feather? And then I'm going to click done. Okay, so I've gotten the sky dialed down. It looks about a stop brighter than what it is being reflected down here. But I'm going to have to come into my adjustment tools now because I need to brush some of this darkness off Half Dome itself and these trees and over into the left side of the image here. I'm going to start with a new brush, and I'm going to come over, and I'm actually, we darkened everything down by about a stop, so I don't want to lighten up quite a stop, but just under that, right about in there, and I'm going to start painting away. And this is a edge sensitive brush, so it understands where the edges is, and it's not going to spill over on you. And you don't have to get this perfect. I'm going to come up in these trees and see if it, I could brighten this way up. You can see where I did it, or I can dial it down to taste. But I think about right about where I was looked pretty good, okay? And now I want to come back down here to the basic tab, and I'm going to bump my contrast up a little bit. Just get that to pop a little bit more, okay? And now things are starting to look pretty good. So that's tip number 4, utilizing in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, your graduated neutral density filter, and then your brush, which think of it as a magic brush. The cool thing that they've done now, it has edge detection on it, and you can kind of brush away where the graduation came in too dark. Okay, so very cool. Let's go on to tip number 5 here. I'm going to go ahead and open up this graduated neutral density file, I guess you would call it. And if we were in 8-bit and we stripped all the color out of our scene, what's really going on is your sensor is recording 256 shades of black and white. Now that goes up exponentially as the camera sensor goes up. Most camera sensors on new cameras now are working in 14-bit. I'm not going to do the math for you. You can go out and do that. But I'm going to keep this real simple and do it in 8-bit. So you kind of get the understanding. And where I'm going with this is I'm going to give you the basics of luminosity masking. I'm going to show you what a luminosity mask does. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this whole scene. So we've got a range over here to the left where our red, green, and blue channel are recording at 000, absolute black. And then all the way over here to the right, where our red, green, and blue channel are recording at 255, 255, 255. And here's how you guys can win your next beer or wine at a bar bet. Ask some know-it-all photographer, how many tones in 8-bit can I get? And they're going to come right back 255. Well, nope, you're going to say 256 because we got to count 0. So there you go, little inside tip. All right, let's come up. I'm in the one of the TK panels here. This is one of the simpler panels, and I'm going to click on this icon. And what I'm going to do is you're going to see down here, we have something called lights with 6 numbers, something called dark with 6 numbers, and something called mids with 3 numbers. So when you click on a lights 1, what it's going to do is it's going to select the 50% brightest pixels that are in the scene or what your sensor captured. When you go to 2, it's going to select the 25% brightest pixels in your scene. 3, 12.5%, 4, 6.25%, let's just call it 6, 5, 3%, and down to 6, 1.5%. Okay, let's come over and look at the darks. So if I was to select a dark 1, it's going to select the 50% darkest pixels in my image. 2, 25%, 3, 12.5%, 4, we'll just call it 6 again, 5, the 3% brightest pixels, and 1, the 1.5% brightest pixels. If you click on mids 1, you're going to see it selects quite an area in the midtones while keeping the outer edges of the highlights and the shadows dark. You can expand that out by clicking on a 2, and you can expand that out even more clicking on a 3. So that's a visual representation with this graduated mask that I created. But how about an actual image? Well, let's go back. You know what? I'm going to come, let's come over to our image of Half Dome. And you can see I've got a lot of layers that I created here. I'm going to turn them all off. And I'm going to get back to just the image that I came out of Lightroom with, not doing a whole lot. And I'm just going to work you through each layer and tell you my thought process. And this is more for you to just get an understanding of the power of luminosity masking. So the first one was a curves layer. And I created a midtones 1 mask that just selected the midtones. You can see anything in black, it's not going to touch. Anything in gray will get a percentage. Anything in white is going to get full 100% effect. And I just brightened up just the midtones in there. Then I created what's called a stamp layer. That's Shift Option Command D. It doesn't do anything, just creates a buffer. And then I accidentally created a levels command, which I don't use much. I just clicked on the wrong thing. And I went to curves, but I came back to the curves that are down here. I hope that makes sense. I got a little out of whack. And I actually took this mask that I created for the sky and I inverted it. And the way you do that again is Shift Command I, and then to place it on that layer, I just Option and clicked and pushed up and inverted it, so now the sky doesn't get any effect, just what's below it gets the effect. And I opened up with a curves command a little bit more of what was underneath, and I can show you even more. I can push up on that a little bit more. Then I put in another stamp layer. Now I started working on the hue saturation of just the trees here. And then I actually dialed back the yellows on those trees. I thought they were a little too much. Then I went and I added a clarity mask. And if you do buy the Tony Kuiper TK7 version, he has a lot of actions. And that's the clarity action. I'll do a video one of these days just showing you some of the different actions that are in there. He really offers you a lot. And then I added another buffer. And then this one was pretty cool. I do this to a lot of my images. Let me show you the mask. And you can see that what's white's getting the effect. And it's kind of like a vignette. I grab the lasso tool, L for lasso, and I kind of select around the middle area of my image. And I right click and I feather, and I'll usually put a big feather of about 500 in there. And then I'll grab a curves command and I will lift up. And I'm going to not utilize the active one, but I can show you the one that was on here. And you can see as I push up, it protects the edges, but it just brings up the center. And I always want to work my viewer's eye into the center of that scene. Here was another stamped layer and another one where I worked on just down below here. What I did is I darkened down the water down here because I felt it was getting a little too bright, and I always want to make my reflections about a stop darker than what it is that's actually being reflected, because that's how we see it in nature. And the last one here looks like I just added a midtones 1 mask just to get a little more pop out of that. And let's see what we can do. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so if I turn it all off, it looks like this. But you can start to see the power of luminosity masks and how we can target it to individual areas of the image. And starting in July, tip of the month, I'm going to start working you guys through different scenarios, starting with luminosity masking, which we work up in here. We can even create masks out of color, and we can create masks for saturation and vibrancy. And it really just kind of gives you guys full control about what you're doing. The AI stuff is great, and I get asked all the time, hey, you going away from the AI stuff? No, but I know how to do everything with masks that AI can do. And AI, I feel like I'm turning 100% control over to the algorithm, whereas here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 layers that is basically doing what the AI could be doing, but doing it precisely and where I want it to go, not where the AI wants it to go. So that's about it, you guys. I hope these 5 tips have helped you. And again, next month, I will pursue this a little further. We'll get into some basic luminosity masking, whet your appetite for that, and then we'll move you forward as we get into the later summer and fall months. And we'll just kind of take it step by step. So once again, I hope you get a chance. If you're interested, check out my workshop coming up. It's about 5 weeks away from now in Madeline Island, Wisconsin. And we're going to have a lot of fun out there. I'm really looking forward to that. It's something a little bit different from what I've been doing. And until next time, this is Don Smith. You take care and stay creative.